Good morning and welcome to the Fundamentals of English Language and Literature Teaching, which is paper number 10 of semester 3, English part 2. We are in the middle of the approaches and methods of unit 3 and we are talking about various approaches. In this video, we shall be talking about the various humanistic approaches that have been put forwarded. As we said, the humanistic approaches give importance to the human beings and their emotions and feelings. There are a number of people who have worked in this area, and accordingly, we have four important approaches being presented as a result of the humanistic experiments. The Silent Way by Caleb Gettigno, Total Physical Response by James Asher, Suggestopedia by Georgi Lozanov, and the Community Language Learning CLL by Charles Curran. Let's talk about these humanistic experiments done by the scholars. The very first is the Silent Way. It is the method of language teaching devised by Caleb Gettigno, a teacher of mathematics in 1916. It believes that a teacher should remain silent in the classroom as much as possible and the learner should be encouraged to produce as much language as possible. It stresses the importance of the maximum participation of the learner in the language classroom. Teacher is considered as the facilitator and the guide and is expected to speak only when it is essential. It is based upon Gettigno's basic belief that teaching must be subordinate to learning. The learning hypothesis underlying Gettigno's works are: number one, learning is facilitated if the learner discovers or creates rather than remembers and repeats what is to be learned. Number two, learning is facilitated by accompanying or mediating on the physical objects. Number three, learning is facilitated by problem solving that involves the material to be learned. It sees language learning as a problem solving activity, highly creative and discovering activity. Discovery learning is very useful here and it has multiple benefits. Berner finds and states that the discovery learning is very useful with the following multiple benefits. Number one, it increases the intellectual potency. Number two, it makes shift from extrinsic to intrinsic rewards. Number three, it helps to converse the memory. Fiddle charts and Cuisinart rods are the major objects that are used in teaching in the Silent Way classroom. The problem solving ensures total physical participation of the learners and it makes the learners very effective. Fiddle charts and Cuisinart rods are the learning kit that the Silent Way proposes. This has a number of colorful rods and of various shapes and various sizes, which are helpful for learning the language because each rod of each color and shape is assigned with some vocabulary item which the students are acquainted with, and once this acquisition is over, the teacher remains silent throughout. The teacher would be just pointing out these Cuisinart rods and fiddle charts which are already correlated in the mind of the learner, so the learners automatically speak. If any learner is not able to speak, their own peer in the class will be correcting them and encouraging them to speak out. The Silent Way aims at having the following principles. Number one, the teacher builds on what learner already knows. So he or she follows from known to unknown. Number two, language is learned through the basic building blocks of sounds, as sound is a common characteristic of all languages. Number three, the teacher's silence encourages peer interaction and group cooperation. Number four, language learning is done best in a non-threatening atmosphere. The teacher is silent and engineers the class, and so the learners do not feel threatened at all. Number five, learners and their errors are dealt with self-monitoring and peer correction. No disapproval is indicated by the teacher. The Silent Way aims at giving oral and oral facility in the basic elements of the target language and providing basic practical knowledge of grammar for the beginners. Getechno suggests that the student should be able to correctly and easily answer questions about themselves, their education, their family, travel, and daily events. Number two, speak with their good accent. Give either a written or oral description of a picture, including the existing relationship that concerns space, time, and numbers. Number three, answer general questions about the culture and the literature of the native speakers of the target language. And number four, perform adequately in the following areas of spelling, grammar, reading comprehension, and writing comprehension. Listening and speaking are at its best, followed by the reading as well as the writing. The silent way encourages shaping students' oral responses without direct and oral instruction. It proposes simple language tasks in which the teacher models and seeks the responses from the learners. Teacher seeks these responses with the help of various teaching aids like the fiddle charts and the Cuisinier rods. Responses are sought for various commands, requests, and visual cues. The silent way demands well trained teachers to remain silent in the classroom and use the charts, rods, Cuisinier rods, and various other audiovisual techniques to make the learners speak. The teacher's task is to teach, to test, and to get out of the way. Pronunciation is focused in the first part of the lesson. The class works on sounds and phrases or sentences depending on the level of the learners is motivated. The teacher's job is to model and point to the fiddle chart in the beginning. Later, the teacher remains silent, monitoring the students' utterances. Thus, it becomes a very important humanistic approach where the teacher becomes the facilitator and the learners do the most of the learning part. The second type of humanistic approach is community language learning, CLL, proposed by Charles Curran. It is also called as the counseling learning approach. The teacher now here becomes a counselor, not the figure of authority to judge what is right and wrong or introduce any concept in the classroom. The learners feel threatened in new learning situations because they come into contact with something unfamiliar. They are afraid of appearing foolish. Hence, the learners are comfortable in groups and communities, whereupon they become more open and talk and respond to each other. The learners sit in a circle in community language learning with a table and a tape recorder in the middle. The teacher is outside the circle. A conversation is started by the learners on any topic of their choice. Anyone can start a discussion on any topic. The only rule is to use the target language. Learners take the help of the teacher as a counselor to interact with each other. Whenever they are struck up to express, the teacher can help them staying outside the circle to motivate them to speak and express themselves. The teacher helps for vocabulary and syntax. Everything that is going on in the discussion is recorded in the tape recorder that is kept in the middle of the table. After the conversation of the community, the tape is rewound and is heard. The learners listen to their own recording, comment upon it, and thereby learn. The teacher notes on the individual errors on a piece of paper and hands over the paper to them individually. The learner carries out self-correction. If it is a common correction or a common error being made by everybody, the teacher goes on to the board to explain the error without pointing out to any student. The teacher does some remedial work also. Doubts of the learners are clarified and a new conversation begins by a new student and on a new topic. The learner starts the conversation on the topic of their interests and discuss. They respond to the expressions, commands, and questions. The learner is active while the teacher becomes a facilitator. Thus, it becomes an important humanistic approach. The third approach is what is called as suggestopedia. Suggestopedia, it has different spellings. You can have SUGGESTOPAEDIA or PEDIA or PEADIA. In various occasions, you find the spelling written in different ways. I try to use the simplest form of the spelling. Suggestopedia, also referred to as the Suggestopedia, is a set of learning recommendations derived from suggestology. Suggestology is a science dealing with the study of non conscious influences on human beings. Suggestopedia is a method developed by Georgy Lozanov, a Bulgarian psychiatrist and educator. The characteristic features of this method are decoration, furniture, classroom management, and the use of music and non authoritative behavior of the teachers. Lozanov claims that there is no sector of public life where suggestology would not be useful. In addition, memorization and learning by suggestopedic methods seem to be accelerative 25 times over that in learning by conventional methods. Most remarkable claim of this method is that it works even if students don't spend time on study outside classroom. Centrality of music and musical rhythm in learning is at the core of this method, which earns the title therapy for it. Joy and psycho-relaxation are must, and music is the best way to relax the students and make them enjoy the class. Theoretically speaking, six principal theoretical components of Suggestopedia are detailed by the proponent of this method. Slow music, posters, colors on the walls, comfortable chairs, lighting arrangement, seating arrangement, everything that is done in the school atmosphere or the classroom atmosphere are maintained to relax the learner and then learn. Children sit, close their eyes, relax, listen to music. There are some breathing exercises to relax the students psychologically. Learners are given new names. In the imagined situation of at a market, conference, tourist, etc. Role plays and simulation of the plays in the various imaginative situations are encouraged. The teacher uses mime and action to brief the sketching. Functional dialogues and situational uses of the language are encouraged. The dialogue is made into two columns, both in the target language and in the mother tongue, and the students are encouraged to use the target language to meet with the new situations. Pedagogic principles underlying Suggestopedia are learning takes place best in relaxed and pleasant atmosphere. Number two, sufficient listening time should be given to the learners to absorb the new material. Active participation helps in learning new material. Number four, role play. In the imaginary situation, fantasy reduces threat, and so the barriers to learning can be overcome. Number five, the functional aspect of language should be emphasized. Number six, music plus fine arts, drama, aid suggestion, and should be integrated with the teaching learning processes. And number seven, the atmosphere, the teaching material, methods and techniques should aim at infantilization so that the learners have a childlike attitude and open mindedness to efficient learning. Suggestopedia aims at quick conversational ability. It believes in the mastery of lists of vocabulary pairs. Learning goals are to be set by the student themselves. The course lasts for a month, covering 10 units. 4 hours of each day are meant for the classes. Classes are to be conducted 6 days a week. Grammaticality and lexically graded dialogues are used for teaching. Teaching approximately 1200 graded vocabulary items is the primary target. Students are encouraged to make new combinations and take on small role plays based on the text in the second step. Learning activity include role plays and imitations and simulations and question answers. But listening activities are emphasized more. Listening in pleasant musical atmosphere forms the basic of the Suggestopedia. Learners are kept in the center. They are only expected to maintain a pseudo passive state rather than engage in figuring out and manipulating. So the learner throws the ball and the peer work and the peer correction begins. Games, role plays, creative language work, etc., are given more emphasis. New dialogues and repetition of these dialogues and learning of the language to be made automatic by giving various suggestions by the facilitator is the basic practice in Suggestopedia. So, Suggestopedia is a wonderful humanistic approach. Students' involvement in language learning under the stewardship of teacher is emphasized. Slightly demanding and more expensive because you have to employ everything that is required to make the learner comfortable, emotionally relaxed, and learn the language effectively. There should be an eclectic combination of various techniques by the teacher. It's in fact very difficult for the teacher to become facilitator and run the class, make the students pick up the language without having any structured syllabus in hand. Extremely useful, but in making the foreign language classroom activities highly interactive and highly participative. The fourth humanistic approach experiments are been done by James Asher, a professor of psychology in California, and he presented his findings in the form of total physical response, TPR. Like Krashen and Terrell, Asher also views adult second language learning as similar to that of child's first language acquisition. It is derived from the developmental psychology, learning theory, humanistic pedagogy, and the procedure proposed by Harold and Dorothy Palmer. It is developed by considering the coordination of speech and action in the learning procedure. The attempt of TPR, that is total physical response, is to teach language through physical actions, motor activity. Speech with actions forms the foundation of TPR. It does not demand systematic linguistic productions. Rather, it involves games and game like activities because it believes in learners' stress reduction. Stress reduction helps in creating a positive mode, which is helpful for effective learning, is the belief of total physical response. Grammar based learning language is reflected in TPR to a little extent. Asher believes that verb in its imperative form is at the center and language use is organized around it. He states most of the grammatical structure of the target language and hundreds of vocabulary items can be learned from the skillful use of imperative instructions by the instructor. It is based on the idea of stimulus and response and is also linked to trace theory, which believes that memory connection affects the recalling ability. So, Asher believes in number one, the existence of innate bioprogram of language learning. Number two, the different learning functions in left and right hemispheres of the brain. Number three, the role stress has in the learning process. Low stress affects in better learning. So, first listening and then speaking. After listening, the most important activity is physically to do the activity and also to speak. So, the natural order of learning the language is definitely followed in TPR, where the learner listens first, acts, and simultaneously speaks, then reads, and then writes. The brain lateralization and reduction of stress are very important in total physical response, theoretically speaking. Teaching the basic speaking skills is the ultimate aim of TPR. This is achieved by comprehensive and comprehension with the help of the physical movements. Goals are to be achieved in TPR through action based drills in imperative forms. Lexeme and grammar are at the base of its syllabus. Structural syllabus and situational language teaching partly forms the TPR lessons, but the difference between them is that TPR believes in comprehension, while the structural approach believes in mastering the structures rather than comprehending them. Unlike methods that operate from grammar based or structural view of the core elements of language, TPR requires initial attention to meaning rather than the mastering of the structures. Major activities that are involved in TPR classroom is imperative drills followed by the physical actions. Conversational dialogues are not taught in the beginning. Role play, slide presentations, simulations in the situational role playing are the common practices in TPR class. Learners are listeners and performers, while teacher is the instructor and model role player. Teacher is supposed to give commands and learners are required to respond physically to them. The learners themselves are in charge of their learning. They have to monitor and evaluate their own progress. Speaking is encouraged when learners are ready to speak. A detailed lesson plan is essential to TPR class. Asher says that it is wise to write out the exact utterances you will be using and especially the novel commands because the action is so fast moving. There is usually no time for you to create spontaneously within the classroom. So, a teacher should not be corrective in the beginning. He should act as a parent. He should be mediating and he should be loving and caring to the children for the development of their language. He or she should encourage the learners to take charge of their own learning and should be a little corrective in the later stage of the language learning. A typical TPR lesson should have the commands like wash your hands, wash your face, wash your hair, and the learners should be in a position to do these actions. Like look for a towel, look for the soap, look for a comb, look for the textbook. Comb your hair, comb Mira's hair, comb Radha's hair, etc. Brush your teeth, brush your pants, brush your table, etc. Similarly, the items like circle, draw a circle on the blackboard and the students have to do this action. Quickly and slowly. The words quickly and slowly can be understood by actually doing the action. Walk quickly to the door and hit it. Walk slowly to the window and jump. Teeth. Touch your teeth. Show your teeth to Girish. Girish, point your teeth to Ram, and so on. Questions like, where is the towel? Mona comes, gets the towel and puts it there. Where is the toothbrush? Meera points to the toothbrush. Where is Girish? Harish points to Girish. A small set of dialogues are given in imaginary situations, and the role rehearsals are being done, first in the form of reading and then in the form of simulation. And while doing all these activities in total physical response, the teacher should be correcting and mediating. Thus, the humanistic approaches are very efficient, though very difficult to implement in the class, efficient from the point of view of the learners to pick up the language. That's why Geeta Nagarajan in 1996 rightly points out that the humanistic approaches tend to see language learning as a process which engages the whole person and not just the intellect. It takes into account the emotional and spiritual needs of an individual too. Caleb Gettick knows the silent way uses fiddle charts and cuisine rods and thereby make the teacher as silent as possible so as to have the student responses. While Charles Curran's Community Language Learning CLL advocates using the tape recorder to record the voice of the students while teaching or while talking. Dr. Georgi Luzanov's Suggestipedia is based on the principle of joy and easiness and hence proposes to have music as the best way to ease the emotional tensions of the learners and promote learning. James Asher's Total Physical Response TPR instructs the teachers to do all the actions while teaching a second language. The humanistic approaches have made the teaching learning of a language more learner centric and have changed the role of teacher to a counselor or a facilitator. Associated with the humanistic approach is the small bit of task-based language teaching, which is a logical development of CLT and humanistic approach. It is proposed by Willis in 1996 and believes in making the learners perform various meaningful tasks to promote learning because activities that involve real communication are essential for language learning and language that is meaningful to the learner supports the learning process automatically. According to Noonan, 1989, a communicative task is a piece of classroom work which involves learners in comprehending, manipulating, producing, or interacting in the target language, while their attention is principally focused on the meaning rather than form. The task should also have a sense of completeness, being able to stand alone in a communicative act in its own right. While this communicative task is being done, a humanistic approach is to be maintained within the class to help the learners do the task and learn by themselves. Post-method pedagogy, it has been the development in the second language teaching learning arena during the 1990s by Professor B. Kumara Vadivelu et al. According to Kumara Vadivelu, 2004, the postmodern pedagogy is a three-dimensional system consisting of three pedagogic parameters: particularity, practicality, and possibility. Only these are to be maintained. And for doing this and making the learner pick up the language, a teacher can follow an eclectic approach, not sticking on to one approach or one method, but combination of methods approaches, whatever suits his or her student the best, is the post-method pedagogy. A theory of practice is an ongoing, living, working theory involving continual reflection and action. Post-method pedagogy believes that context-sensitive pedagogic knowledge has to emerge from teachers and their practice of everyday teaching, and in this sense, a post-method pedagogy will always remain a work in progress. What is the important emphasis of the teaching learning processes in the second language teaching is a communicative approach and the humanistic approaches, along with eclectic combination of all the principles, methods, and approaches that we learned. Thus, to sum up, over the last 100 years in the history of language teaching, there has been a continuous search for more effective ways of teaching second and foreign languages. However, a number of approaches, there is no clear application of their assumptions and principles in the classroom, and no approach or no method is complete in itself. The selection of various approaches depends on the level of competency of the students, and much is left to the individual teacher's skill and expertise. There started a search whether any alternative approach or approaches are available outside the framework of these brand names of methods and approaches. Even though the study of these approaches is a must for teachers in order to appreciate the link between theory and practice, to understand the set of activity resources available to the imaginative teachers, how best they can be implemented in the class, how best these can be used for the efficient learning output depends upon the judgment, experience, and creativity of the teacher in the classroom. In order to develop a personal approach to teaching, one needs to know the basic assumptions, theories, activities, beliefs, principles, and techniques of effective teaching and learning. Depending on the different type of class he or she is teaching, the level of the students, the understanding of the students, an individual teacher might draw different principles at different times. Experimentation with different approaches and methods can provide teachers with an initial practice, knowledge base on teaching, and can also be used to explore and develop the teacher's own beliefs, principles, and practices. Second language teaching and learning is increasingly a field of intensive research and theorizing, which would continue to motivate new language teaching and learning approaches which are totally learner-centric. Thank you very much for being a part of this video that has talked about different types of humanistic approaches along with task-based language learning and post-method pedagogy.